Today we're going to be learning Shekalim Daf Zayin. This is the daf for the first day of Pesach. We're going to start from the bottom of the page of Vav Amud Bet. Motar Nazir l'nidava. This was a quote from the Mishnah. Whatever's left over from money that a Nazir designates goes to the nidava. We keep repeating this phrase, which is the extra money in the temple for korbanot olah, burnt offerings for Ketz HaMizbeach. They just burn on the altar when there's nothing else happening. Rav Chisda Amar, v'hu shekarba chatato basof. This is only, now a Nazir has to bring a chatat, an olah, and a shlamim. So comes the Rav Chisda, and he says this is only if the chatat was brought at the end. Okay, what does this mean? It means that if you have a chatat left over, then the extra is going to go to nidava. But if not, if, let's say, what he did was he took money for a chatat, he bought an animal, then he took money for an olah, he bought an animal, then he took money for the shlamim, and what's left over from that is really now left over from the shlamim, because whatever was left was designated for the shlamim. Then it has a law of a shlamim, motaran shlamim. Rabbi Zera disagrees and says, "Afilu kervo shlamim levasam. Halacha achati b'nazir shetehem motaran nedava." It doesn't matter the order. Any motar was originally designated for a chatat, and therefore its leftover is going to be considered a chatat, right? Which means it's going to go to nidava. It's like leftovers of any chatat. So now the Gemara says, Matnita Mesaya L'Dain and Matnita Mesaya L'Dain. We're going to bring a braita that supports each approach. Matnita Mesaya Rabbi Zera, which was the last approach, which is it's always going to go to nidava. So here goes. Eluhem ma'ot stumin. Okay, these are what we call ma'ot stumin. This is ma'ot that you designated a whole sum of money for all of your Nazir korbanot. Kol shedmei chatat mitot muva. Kol shedmei chatat metot me'uravot bahen. Afilu hifrish shemei chatat mitocha ma'ot stumin. I think there's a girsa issue. I'm just going to quickly find that bet. It goes to mitot, right? It's not mitot. I knew there was a mistake here. And the gra, there's a lot of problems with the girsa out here. We're going to see in another minute also. If you look at the Hagahot Gra, which is on the side of the page, he says it should say kol shedmei chatat mu'uravim bahen. It doesn't say mitot. Any chatat money that is involved here, in other words, if there was at all a chatat in there at any point, then afilu okay, so then, right, mu'uravot bahen, it's going to be nidava. And then it says, afilu hifrish demei chatat mitocha. Forget about if it was ma'ot stumim. We started off, we said, I'm putting 100 shekel in for all these animals. Then you start separating out. Even if he separated the demei chatat and whatever's left, right? Then still ma'ot stumim hem. We're still going to call that ma'ot stumin. And basically we're going to say that this is all going to go to nidava, even though we separated the chatat out, and that proves Rabbi Zera. Manita mesaya l'Rav Chisda. Elu l'chatati v'ashar l'niziruti v'met. Let's say you say this money is going from a chatat, this money, the rest of it is going for everything else, and then he dies. So now it's missing some important words. So let's go to the Gra. The Gra says, Elu l'chatat v'ashar l'shar niziruti v'met. That's a repeat. Demei chatat yilchu liyam hamelach. Any money that was designated for the chatat goes to Yam HaMelech, according to this opinion. V'ashar yaviu chetzio olah v'chetzio shlamim. Whatever's left, you split half olah, half shlamim. U'moalim b'kulam ve'ein moalim b'miktzatan. What does this mean? Me'ila is misuse of consecrated property. It only applies to things that are supposed to be burnt on the altar. A shlamim is meant for the owners. Therefore, there's no me'ila. The only time there's me'ila is after you slaughter the animal, the parts that are supposed to be burnt, there's me'ila. But right now there's no me'ila because it's an animal that's designated for a peace offering, which is owned by the owner and not sanctified. So therefore, whatever's left, and it's first you separated the chatat. That's chatat. Okay. Now we're going to treat the rest of it like what it is, an olah and a shlamim, not like a chatat. This proves Rav Chisda already. So what is exactly the law? What happens is, if I take all that money and I use all of it, since there's an olah mixed in, and an olah is consecrated property, is hekdesh, because the whole thing gets burnt on the altar, therefore there's going to be a law of me'ila. But if I only use some of the money, I didn't misuse consecrated property because I don't know if I did or I didn't, because maybe it was the shlamim money and not the olah money. And therefore, that's what it means, ein mo'alim b'miktzatan. So here you see, we don't treat it all as chatat. even though originally it was all one lump sum, and then I started splitting it. So that proves Rav Chisda. The lo amal, and then they point out in Kitchen and Catch this, imek yiplu l'nidava, which would have matched Rav Chisda, would have matched the other opinion, Rabbi Zeir. Rav Chisda amal, motar lachmosh al nazir yerakev. Okay, so if you have bread, the Nazir brings bread, they're matzah kind of bread. The Nazir brings a bread offering 20 loaves with the sacrifices also. If you have left over from here, it has to be left to rot. If you have leftover bread, why is that? We're going to see. Amar Rabbi Yossi v'ye'ot. And actually what you said was very good. Why? You can't sacrifice the bread by itself. There is no such thing as a bread offering on its own. You can't sacrifice it with another Nazir offering because there is no such thing as Nazirut without bread. As you can't say, I'm going to take, basically what it means is I can't say I'm going to put it to someone else's Nazir offering, because anytime a Nazir takes an offering, he always brings it with bread. So it's going to have the bread already, and therefore you can't say I'll add it to that person's bread. No, that we read. The fum came because of this. And therefore, he must be right, where he says the only thing left to do is to leave it to rot because it was already sanctified. There's absolutely nothing you could do with it, and therefore we leave it to rot. This is like Kedushat Shvit, Shemitah year, which is coming up. So also, if there's Shemitah produce and you don't eat it, it has to be left to rot. You can't just throw it out, because sanctified items have to be left to rot before you can actually throw them away, because it's disgraceful to throw it away without having it rot first. Now, you might think it's a little disgraceful to let it rot, but their attitude was, no, it's disrespectful to throw it out when it's still in good condition. Sovereign Meimar, they thought to say, hu motar lachmo, hu motar nisachav. This is not only true for the bread, but it's also true for the nisachim that go with his sacrifices, which is there's libations that go along with the sacrifices, and we would have thought it would be the same. They thought to say it was the same. But Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Bun, this is the Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Bun that we've talked about. That's like the Rav Ashi of the Yerushalmi. Motar nisachav kodshe kodshim inun v'yiplu l'nidava. The remainder of the nisachim is kodshe kodshim, and therefore it goes to nidava. It's not the same as the bread. The bread is for the owner to eat. The nisachim get put on the altar. They're sanctified, so they go to nidava, anything that's extra. Adate de Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Bun. Shmuel, okay, so what this really means is Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Bun said the following thing. What did he say? Shmuel, you have to, again, there's a problem with the girsa. I'm going to read it according to a girsa that I think it's the girsa of the Gra, I believe. Shmuel, Rav Chisda, where is it? Rabbi Elazar, Shloshtan Amru Davar Echad. Following three people, this comes up a lot in the Bavli also, where they say all these three people really are saying one and the same thing. So Rav Chisda, Ahad Amaran, that's what we said, that the Nisachim, right? We just said, Rav Chisda said that the Motar Lachmo of the Nazir is Yerakev, but then Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Bun said, that's only the Lechem, but the Nisachim are going to go to Nidava. So we're now talking about what they inferred from what he said. Okay, because that's Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Bun who inferred that, and now he himself is going to say, therefore, the way I understand Rav Chisda is the Nisachim go to Nidava. That means leftover Kodshe Kodshim becomes Nidava. That's the same as Shmuel. What did Shmuel say? Tama Rabbi Yossi, ad anan taman, shmate kal Rabbi Yehuda shal Shmuel. Rabbi Yossi said, while I was there in Babel, I heard Rabbi Yehuda ask Shmuel, hiflish sheklo v'met. What happens if you designate your shekel? We finally got back to machatzit shekel, and you die. Amarle yiplu l'nedava. Same thing, because the shekel is kodshe kodshim, because it goes to the sacrifices like the korban tamid and those which are kodshe kodshim. Rabbi Elazar Amar, he's the third one who says the same idea. Motar asirita efa shelo Rabbi Yochanan Amar yulchem liyam hamelach. Rabbi Elazar Amar yiplu l'nedava. We saw this already. The motar asirita efa of the kohen gadol, which gets burnt on the altar, also Kodshe Kodshim, it goes l'nidava. So there you see, again, according to Rabbi Yochanan, it doesn't. It goes to Yam HaMelech, but according to Rabbi Elazar, it's yiplu l'nidava. That's the same as what we saw before. Okay. Now we're getting a little bit off topic, and we're talking about very interesting issues that come up when it comes to tzedakah, when it comes up to, we're going to start with pidyon shvuyim, okay, which is trying to get people out of prison, okay, we're trapped by, let's say, people who took them for no reason. I'm blanking on the word, but you all know what I mean. So here goes the Mishnah. Motar shvuyim l'shvuyim. Okay, shvuyim, people taken captive. If you have money designated for that purpose, it has to go to shvuyim. Okay, if it was designated for that, it has to stay for that. Motar shavoy loto shavoy. Let's say you collected money. Okay, right, and go with one of the famous ones. Gilad Shalit was in captivity. If they collected money for Gilad Shalit, the leftovers, it can only be used for Gilad Shalit. Okay, he gets the money. It doesn't go to helping someone else. Motar aniyim la'aniyim. Motar ani lo to'ani. Same thing with tzedakah money. If you give tzedakah money to go to poor people, then what's left over, let's say you finish whatever drive you're doing and you still have money. Let's say right now we're doing Kimcha de Pischa drives. So you're left over with money, that has to go to poor people. Motar ani lo to'ani. If you collected money for someone in particular, the leftovers go to that person. Motar hamitim lemitim. If you give money to a dead person, it goes to dead people in general. Let's say you give money to the Chaver Kadisha, so it has to stay there. They can't start using it for other things. Motar hamet liyorshav. But if it's for one particular person, it can't go to the mate himself, so it goes to his inheritors. But here we're going to have a debate. Rabbi Meir doesn't agree. Meir omer motar hamet yehemunach ad shavo Eliyahu. We have to leave it till Eliyahu comes. Eliyahu is the one known to resolve all of our issues that we have and things that we don't know the answers to. Rabbi Natan amar motar hamed bonim lo nefesh al kivlo. It doesn't go to his inheritors. It goes to build him a nice monument on his grave, whether it's a tombstone or whether it's, sometimes we've gone to these cemeteries where they have a whole structure on top of the grave. So it goes to something like that. So we have a three-way debate what we do with extra money. Does it go to the inheritors of the deceased? Or does it have to go to the mate himself, in which case we don't really have much to do with it. So either we leave it till Eliyahu comes, or we put it on a monument. So here starts the Gemara. Let's say you have a dead person and you collected money to bury them because you thought they didn't have money. Turns out you found out they had a huge amount of money. So what do? Rabbi Yirmiyah Savar Meimar Motar Hamet Liyorshav. He thought to say, well, since we collected it for this person, let's give it to their inheritors. Amar le Rabbi Idi Dechutra. What do you mean? They were giving it to him, not to his inheritors. It should just go back to them. They were giving it to him and he clearly didn't need it. Amar le. So now, if you paid attention to the words, Rabbi Yirmiyah savar lamema, he thought to say, came Rav Idi and he said, no way, that's not true. And I know the way it goes. So Rabbi Yirmiyah says to him, Amar le, analo amalit, at menalach. I didn't say what I said definitively. Where do you get what you say from? I was just suggesting. So I didn't have to prove my point, but you're saying it with such confidence. What did you mean by this? Tani b'shem Rabbi Natan, motar hamet yivnelo nefesh al kivro v'yaselo ziluf. So by the way, we don't have an answer. Okay, and now we're moving on. So there was a bright in the name of Rabbi Natan, motar hamet, what's left from the dead body, for a dead person, yivnelo nefesh al kivro v'yaselo ziluf al gabei mitato. Ziluf is they would spray some scented stuff onto the grave so that it would take away the bad smell. So that's what the extra money goes to for the grave itself. Tan, another bright. Ein podin shavoy b'shavoy, ve'ein govin talit b'talit. You can't take money from one person who was in captivity and give it to somebody else. Or you can't take money for clothing for one poor person and give it to somebody else. However, if the people who are in charge of the tzedakah money do this, we don't stop them. Okay, we don't protest. If it was already done, it was done. It's not the end of the world. We don't make monuments for tzaddikim. Why? Because what's their monument? Their monument is not a big piece of whatever on there, or a big piece of stone on their grave. Their monument is their words. That's what the rabbis leave over. Now, since they talked about death, they're talking about what happens to Talmidei Chachamim after their death. How do they still live on in our lives, right? And we who spend our days learning about all of their things, we can really understand this, because these rabbis to us really come alive because we're reading everything, right? We're learning about all the things they said. So Rabbi Yochanan have a masmich va'azil al Rabbi Chia bar Abba. He was leaning on masmich va'azil. He was leaning on va'azil al Rabbi Chia bar Abba. He was leaning on. I think there's a word missing here. It's a lot of girsa problems. Al Rabbi Yossi. No, that's not the right letter. Okay, he was leaning on someone. Va'azil al Rabbi Chia bar Abba. And Rabbi Chia bar Abba comes in. I'm just going to check where, so I get it right, where exactly what he was doing here. But anyway, he was leaning on him, and let me just check. He was mismach va'azil al Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Oh, sorry. Okay, that's what it is. He was leaning on Rabbi Chia bar Abba on his shoulder. Okay, he was leaning on him. I misread. V'haya Rabbi Elazar chamele umetamer le mikame. Now, what happened? Rabbi Elazar, who's Rabbi Elazar ben Pedad, who's his student. Now, this is really important. What happened? He saw him, chamele. That means he saw him. And then what did he do? Mitamerle. He hid from Rabbi Yochanan. Now, you can imagine Rabbi Yochanan's reaction to this. Rabbi Yochanan is a bit harsh in general. We know the famous story of him and Rish Lakish. Gets angry at Rish Lakish at the end of his life, and Rish Lakish ends up dying. And then because of their argument, and then Rabbi Yochanan ends up dying because he says, "Oh chavruta, oh mituta, I lost my best chavruta, and I'd rather die." So here also, he has a bit of a harsh reaction. Okay, first of all, he calls him a Bavli. Okay, he says this Babylonian, Rabbi Elazar ben Pedat, apparently had been born in Babylonia. He lived in Eretz Israel for a long time, but he was born in Babylonia. And he says, this Bavli did two things wrong. What did he do wrong? Avi bechada, okay, Avi. Chada, one, delo shal b'shlamei. He didn't say, hello, how are you? Bechada mitamel. And secondly, he hid from me. That's really inappropriate. So Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi is going to try to justify what Rabbi Elazar ben Pedat did. Amarli, Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi. Kach nahagin and gabhon. That's how they behave in Bavel. The Ze'eri lo sha'al b'shlomei de Rabba. Ze'eri wouldn't ask Rabba, how are you? Why? Di'inu nahagin u'makaimin. They want to try to keep this pasuk in Eov, which says, when Eov discusses what it used to be like when he had everything before the Satan convinced God to take everything away from him, he said, Ra'uni na'arim v'nechba'u v'yishishim kamu amadu. The young youth saw me and hid from me, and the elders stood up before me. So what do you see here? You see that the younger people, the students, hide. That was their appropriate way of showing respect. They hide from them. So Amarle, so he says to him, now he wants to explain to him why, and he brings a great mashal, a parable, he says, or an example. He says, why did he hide from you? Now I'm going to explain. So number one, he's not supposed to ask your shalom. He's not supposed to. It's not appropriate for a student to ask a rabbi, how are you today? Not appropriate. You can see why people might say that. I mean, to a certain extent, we think you should ask, but there's people who you don't ask, how are you? It's not appropriate. It's too much people on the same level, not someone at a higher level. So now he says to him like this. Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi says to Rabbi Yochanan, if you're passing, are you allowed to pass by the pesel, this idol called Adola? Amarle, ma'at palig le'yakav. Well, it's not like I can pass by it. It's not like I'm giving it any respect. Avor kamahu v'samu einai. I walk by and I close my eyes and then I don't look at it. Amarle, ye'ut Rabbi Elazar avid delo avid kamech. You see, that's what Rabbi Elazar did. If he walked right by you, it would have been insulting that he didn't ask your shalom. He didn't ask how you are. So therefore, he hid so that he wouldn't have to walk by you. It's like closing your eyes in front of a door. So now, right? In other words, closing your eyes in front of a door would be insulting to a door, right? So if he just closed his eyes and didn't respond to you, it would be like what you do to the pesel. So therefore, that's why he hid from you. So now he says, it would have looked like it was disrespectful. So here he twists it around and shows it was actually respecting you, the fact that he hid from you and the fact that he didn't say hello. But now we get more of Rabbi Yochanan. V'od avid habaflai. Another thing he did. Tilo amar shmata mishmei. He didn't say what I taught in my name. He just taught it without saying my name. Nichnesu l'fanav Rabbi Ami v'Rabbi Asi. So now instead of Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, Rabbi Ami v'Rabbi Asi come and they try to justify what he did. אמרו לו, רבי, כך היה מעשה בבית הכנסת של תרסים, בנגר שיש בראשו גלוסה, שנחלקו רבי אלעזר ורבי יוסי, עד שקראו ספר תורה בחמתן. He said, what are you getting upset with Rabbi Elazar ben Padat? There was another case that happened with two rabbis. They had a disagreement. Okay, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yossi, they had a disagreement about this neger. Okay, this is a bolt that has a round part on the side where you would hold it. And there was a whole debate. There's a debate about what even the debate was about, but we learned this in Shabbat. The question is it muktzah or not? Is it a utensil? I'm just giving one explanation. Some people say it's something else, but can you use this bolt on Shabbat? Is it a kli, which means they won't be muktzah because it could be used for something else? Or is it not a utensil, in which case you can't use it, you can't move it at all on Shabbat because it has no purpose. So now, it's one of the reasons. There could be, some people say maybe it's bone, you're building. There's a debate about what exactly is, not our issue, so I don't want to spend time on it. But they got into this whole big fight and they ripped a Sefer Torah. So he's saying, calm down, Rav Asi and Rav Ami, tell him, what? Relax, don't get so worked up. So first of all, they say, what, you think they really ripped a Sefer Torah? What kind of craziness? They got upset at each other, so they ripped a Sefer Torah. Well, a Sefer Torah was torn on account of their arguing. We don't know exactly how, but somehow they ripped a Sefer Torah accidentally. It's not like they purposely did. There was someone there who said, he said, where this happened, I wouldn't be surprised if this will become a Beit Avodah Zarah, a place of idol worship, or had been in the past, and maybe that's why this terrible thing happened about the Sefer Torah ripping. V'chazar va'amal. Okay, so and by the way, they say that it actually was proven that this was the case. Now, chazar va'amal. So Rabbi Yochanan says, don't try to bring me an example from Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yossi, because hachdein mechavre, that's two people who were at the same level. They were friends, they were colleagues. So they shouldn't be fighting. But he's my student. This isn't appropriate. So Rav Asi and Rav Ami did not succeed in appeasing Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yaakov Ra'idi comes back. Amar lo k'tiv, he says to him the following: Kasher tziva Hashem et Moshe avdo, ken tziva Moshe et Yoshua. This is in Sefer Yoshua. It says, just like God commanded Moshe, such Moshe commanded Yoshua, and Yoshua did exactly as God said. Do you think that every time Yoshua came and taught something, he said, Moshe told me this, Moshe told me this? All he'll be saying all day is, Moshe told me this. Everybody knows that when he speaks, he's speaking in the name of his rabbi, of Moshe. Everybody knew that. Likewise, when Rabbi Elazar ben Padat speaks, everybody knows that he's speaking in your name. So he doesn't need to say it every time because it's obvious. Afata, and that's the word we're going to say, is going to connect it. Elazar Yoshev Doresh, v'kol yodim shatorah shelchai. So what's Rabbi Yochanan's reaction? You expect him to say, that's a good claim. But instead of saying that, which is really what he meant, he instead, and you see his temper, Amar Lahen, he goes to the other two people, Rav Asi, Rav Ami, and he says to them, why couldn't you have given that reason like Ben Idi did? It's a kind of underhanded way of complimenting Rabbi Yaakov Ra'idi and offending, right, the other two. Why didn't you know that? Rabbi Yochanan, my kulehai, why is it so important for him to say something b'shem omro, in the name of someone who said it? Now, we've seen in the Bavli many times if this is a very big value. We say anyone who says it in the name of the person that he learned it from, he brings geula olam, redemption. There's all sorts of statements about it. So why is it so important? But he wants them to teach what they learned in his name. David asked for rachamim about this, for mercy from God. I want to live in your tent forever, and I want to hide, I want to kind of go under your wing. What does it mean? He's not going to live forever. Everybody knows you don't live forever. This is what David said to God. I want my words to be said forever. I want to live forever. The people will be quoting me. And David actually was worthy of this because we're always quoting from David, right? From Tehillim is attributed to David, and they're always quoting in his name. That's what I want. So that's what Rabbi Yochanan says. That's important to me. I want to be living forever. I want to live on in people's lives. Shimon ben Nezira b'shem Rabbi Yitzchak amar, kol tamid chacham she'omrim dvar halacha mipiv ba'olam hazeh, if a Talmid Chacham says a Dvar Halacha, if somebody quotes something in your name, if you're dead, your lips will quiver or will move in the grave. It's as if you're speaking. How do we know this? So now your palate will be like good wine. It will be, it will speak the siftei, it will make movements of people who are sleeping. What happens to grapes? As soon as you put your fingers on it, it starts to bubble up. They say they use this verse to say this is what it means, that it will move in the grave. So now the Gemara asks an interesting question. What pleasure do you get from your lips moving in the grave? That seems a little bit odd. Now, it's going to be a difficult answer because what do we know about people once they're dead? It's like someone who drinks this drink of wine with honey and other things where it seems to, we'll see this in a minute. Let's hold off and we'll see it in the Gemara. Rabbi Yitzchak Amar, it's like drinking old wine. Even though you drink it now, you end up with a taste after. You feel something afterwards. That's the idea here. Again, like I said, it's a little bit hard to understand because they're not really alive anymore, but maybe it's, they spoke then and they feel something after, or once someone speaks, they have some sense of it while they're in the grave. This is a beautiful description of Rav Soloveitchik. Can't remember if he describes himself or when his father was learning, that it was as if the Rambam was in the room with him, and all the Rishonim are there, and all the Amoraim and the Tanaim, and it's this feeling of they're talking to me, and that's exactly what it says here. If you say something in the name of that person, you'll see him in front of your eyes. It's as if he's with you. And they understand yitalech as learning, like to walk in Torah. So, and B'Tselem, the image will appear while you're walking in Torah. K'tiv Rav Adam Yikra Ish Chasto. Okay, what's this? Rav Adam, a great person, which is not really a great person, we're going to see, or most people, it really means Yikra Ish Chasto. They'll claim they're great. They'll proclaim their own greatness. Zeh Shar Kol Adam. That's everyone. The Ish Emuni Miyimtza. But who are you going to find? This is a verse in, I assume it's in Mishlei. It's a verse in Mishlei. But it's very rare to find an Ish Emunim. What's an Ish Emunim? Zeh Rabbi Zera. This is someone who only says things when they're sure about what it is, and they quote it in the name of the person who they saw. What does Rabbi Zera have to do with this? Amar Rabbi Zera, Leitan Tzrichin Chashashin Lishmate de Rav Sheshet, Dehu Gavra Mefatcha. We don't listen to the word. Okay, there's two ways to read this, opposite readings. Rav Sheshet was blind. So he says we shouldn't be listening to what he says because he didn't see it directly from the person. And here you see Rabbi Zera was very careful. Only when he saw the person and he understood exactly what they meant, would he then pass it on in his name. Some people say that no, Rav Sheshet, because he couldn't see people, he was much more sensitive and he had much more understanding than other people. Other people are distracted by things they see. Since he didn't see, he listened very, very carefully and therefore was very particular and meticulous about passing on. And Rabbi Zera would go with his statements because of that. So here you see Rabbi Zera is the Ish Emuni Miyimtza. According to that interpretation, you have to wonder why they didn't say it was Rav Sheshet. Amalei Rabbi Zera leRabbi Asi. Chakim Rebbe leBar Patya de'at amart shmate mishmo. So Rebbe, and second Chakim is to remember Chakim leBar Patya de'at amart shmate mishmei. He said, one quick minute, Chakim. Right. Chakim means did he recognize? Did Rebbe recognize Bar Patya? Okay, Rebbe. So what they're asking about, he says to Rav Asi, do you recognize Bar Patya? Did you see him? That you're quoting something in his name, but you never met him. So how could you possibly quote something in someone's name if you didn't actually see them? Based on what we just said about Rabbi Zera, about being particularly careful. So he says, Amar le Rabbi Yochanan Amra Mishmei. Rabbi Yochanan said it in his name, and I trust Rabbi Yochanan. Before now, we were saying it's hearsay. It's not hearsay if I can totally trust the person who said it. And I know Rabbi Yochanan saw him directly, so I can pass it on in his name. As I can pass it on in Bar Patya's name, even though I didn't hear it directly. Same thing here. Amar le Rabbi Zera le Rabbi Asi. Chakim Rabbi le Rav. Did you meet Rav? The Atamar Shmati Mishmei, that you said something in his name. Amar le Ravad Barava Amar Mishmei. Ravad Barava said in his name, and that was enough for me because I trust him. Ein dor she'ein bo leitzanim. There's no generation without leitzanim. Leitzanim are lazy people, people who do silly, frolicky things. B'doro shel David, ma'ayu putzei ador osim. So what would they do in David's times? Hayochem etzel chalonotav shel David, omrim lo, David, ematai yibaneh beit hamikdash. They would tease him. They knew he really wanted the temple built. Said, when is it going to be built? And I was, why don't you die already so we can get the Beit HaMikdash built? Ematai Beit Hashem nelech. We're quoting from Tehillim that David said, when are you going to go to Beit Hashem? When are we going to get to go to Beit Hashem? Vaya David Omer, Af al pi shemitkavenim lachiseni, even though I know they're just trying to get me angry, Yavo alai im lo hayiti sameach b'divreihem. I will get punished, or I will get, if I'm not going to be happy about what they say. In other words, I'm not going to let them get me angry. I'm going to rejoice in what they say. Why? Now they're basically darshaning a verse in Tehillim which says, I was rejoicing when the people said Beit Hashem Nelech. So here you have it. They were trying to make fun of me and I rejoiced with it. Right? And when you die, what will happen? What did God say? When your days are full and you're ready to die, then I'll build the temple. So how did they darshan this? God says to David, I'm giving you your full life. I'm not going to cut your life early just so we can build the temple. And now, don't be upset about this. Why? What's the whole purpose? Well, purpose, now this is interesting because we're in Shekalim, and the money was used to buy the korbanot tzibor, and it's an interesting way to end this chapter. And it's really bringing criticism about the sacrifices. What's the whole point? He's going to do it so we can do these public sacrifices. But I'd rather your righteousness and your justice. That's more important to me than sacrifices. This sounds like all of Nevi'im Achronim, where they say, oh, the people keep saying, Echtav Ashuv, right? I'll sin, I'll come back, I'll bring my sacrifices. God doesn't want those kind of sacrifices. God wants justice and righteousness. So Chaviv Alai, Tzakal Mishpat Shatau say, Yoter Min HaKorban Shne'emar, as it says, Asot Tzakal Mishpat Nivchar LaHashem Mizevach. Right, we'd rather have Tzakal Mishpat than the Zevach, than the sacrifices. And with this, Hadran Alach Mitzarfin Shekalim. Now we get to the next chapter. Mishnah. We made reference to this before. There's 3 times a year where they would basically take all the money that was collected and they would set aside money. We're going to now buy the next bunch of korbanot tzibor with this money. When would they do this? Bifros HaPesach, half a month before Pesach. Bifros HaAtzeret, half a month before Shavuot. And Bifros HaChag, half a month before Sukkot. So before the 3 regalim. This is the same times of year that they would do the Maaser Behema, which is every 10th of their livestock. They would have to take Maaser and bring it. It would be sanctified. They would sacrifice it. So that's a 10th of their animals. And until then, it would be from all the animals that were born. Until then, any new animal was not able to be used for anything until you did the Maaser Behema. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Ben Azai Omer. So that was the first opinion. Now we're going to have 3 different opinions. We're going to see in the Gemara what it's based on, not in today's daf. Ben Azai Omer, okay, it's the 29th of Adar. We don't count it 2 weeks before Pesach. We give it a particular date on the 29th of Adar. Ube Echab Sivan, and on the 1st of Sivan, note this is not 2 weeks before, it's only a week before Shavuot. And Be'esrim Tisha B'Av, this is a month and a half before Sukkot, not 2 weeks before. So he disagrees on 3 things. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Omrim be'Echad Nisan. Okay, that's similar to everybody. They're all either 29th of Adar, 1st of Nisan, or 2 weeks before. Be'Echad Sivan, the 1st of Sivan, right? 2 weeks before it comes out on Echad Nisan. The other opinion is a day before, or maybe 2 days before. There's a debate. We'll get to that more next class. So they say Be'Echad Nisan, Be'Echad Sivan, okay, the 1st of Sivan, rather than right, that's actually the same as Ben Azai. Be'Esrim Tisha Be'Elul, they don't say the 29th of Av, they say the next month, which is basically almost 2 weeks before Pesach, not Pesach, Sukkot. Why did they say the 29th of Elul and not the 1st of Tishrei? You can't take Trumot, you can't take Maslot on Yom Tov, so we have to do it the 29th. Even though theoretically it could have been the 1st of Tishrei. That's why they did it early. Gemara starts. Every time it says pras, it means half. Half of what? You're supposed to learn 30 days before each holiday, so it's half of that. Now, some people say you're not supposed to learn 30 days before Shavuot. There's not so many halachot to learn. Yes, by Pesach, possibly by Sukkot, but not by Shavuot. And maybe that's why Shavuot is on the 1st and not 2 weeks before. Behem ganot. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Why do we do those times? What do they have to do with? And we understand when it comes to the Trumat Lishka, it was before the holiday season. But why do we do this for the animals? So that's Rabbi Yochanan. That's when they were born. They would breed. The animals would be born specifically in those times. Rabbi Achav, Rabbi Tanchel, B'Rachia, B'Shem Rabbi Yosha ben Levi, Kadesh Tia Be'ema Mitzuya Lo Le'Regalim. No, it has the same idea about the Aliyah L'Regel. We want people to have animals to bring for sacrifices. People would often bring voluntary offerings when they came to the temple. So we need more animals. So because of that, Amar Rabbi Yudin, Shelo Yavo Lidei Baal Ta'achil. If they had vows they had to fulfill, then we want to make sure they don't push it off and they push off and it's too late. There's a pasuk that says, when you keep a promise, you have to keep your promise and keep on time and don't push it too late. If you don't do Maaser Beima on time, you're also over on Baal Ta'achir. You have to do it on time on these dates. And if you don't, then it's a problem because you're supposed to already bring that Maaser. With that, we'll finish for today and we'll pick up after Chag on the next page. Chag Sameach or Moadim L'Simcha.